Video contains sensitive courtroom testimony. Viewer discretion is advised. This content is intended for educational and entertainment purposes only. Ally Carter just took the stand, and what she exposed about Diddy has stunned the world. For years, her story was ignored, but now, under oath, she's revealing the truth about secret parties, manipulation, and a hidden play cult behind the fame. This isn't a rumor anymore, it's real, and it's happening in court. Let's break down exactly what Ally just exposed. Ally Carter's connection to Diddy began in the shadows of the entertainment world, where aspiring talents often crossed paths with powerful figures. She wasn't a celebrity. She wasn't a well-known model. But according to past interviews and resurfaced footage, she was someone who had been invited into Diddy's circles as far back as her teenage years. Public records and content archives show Ally appeared in certain industry events linked to bad boy-affiliated collaborators. She had once shared, on a now-deleted online video, that she had been introduced to private celebrity gatherings, events that were tightly controlled and surrounded by mystery. These were not public after-parties, but rather private invite-only events, often with non-disclosure agreements and strict no-phone policies. Carter's face remained largely unknown, but her allegations grew louder in recent years as other names and lawsuits began to validate what she had once described. The nature of her association with Diddy wasn't romantic in the traditional sense. It was systemic. She alleged that she, like many other young women, was selected, coached, and placed within proximity to elite celebrity circles under the guise of opportunity. Her online testimonies pointed to a power imbalance that wasn't just personal, it was institutional. Ally claimed that women were presented with lavish environments, luxury experiences, and promises of success. But behind those doors, as she described in her viral confession, was a darker reality. Women were reportedly conditioned to remain silent, to perform, and to accept the unwritten rules of these encounters. Carter was not the only one to make such claims. Former employees and victims in the civil lawsuits filed against Diddy in 2023 and 2024 echoed similar setups: luxury masking control, influence cloaked as generosity. One of the most unsettling elements of Carter's account was not simply what she alleged happened to her, but how long she held it in. For years, she remained silent, not because she didn't want to speak, but because, as she later explained, no one would believe a nobody against a billionaire. Her initial online statements in 2021 were flooded with skepticism, mockery, and takedown attempts. Her voice was drowned in celebrity loyalty and legal threats. She didn't have the legal backing or social capital to force a conversation. And yet the claims remained online, and small communities began to revisit them, especially as new lawsuits filed by other women, including Cassie Ventura, lent credibility to a pattern. Ally's silence was a survival mechanism. She had been threatened, she claimed, and was told repeatedly that no one would take her seriously. She feared for her safety, her reputation, and any chance she had at a normal life. In online interviews that have since resurfaced, she expressed moments of emotional collapse and withdrawal from public life. The trauma was isolating. But when federal investigations picked up pace in late 2023, and media outlets began highlighting the broader pattern of accusations against Diddy, Carter was no longer a lone voice. Journalists began requesting interviews. Investigators opened informal lines of communication. When the Department of Homeland Security raided Diddy's homes in March 2024, a turning point came. Suddenly, her name wasn't just a whisper, it was part of a larger timeline. Her early online statements were being combed through, transcribed, and compared with court-filed claims. While she was not named in the initial lawsuits, several elements in public affidavits mirrored what she had described years prior. The timing, locations, party setups, and recurring figures began to paint a picture of consistency across multiple testimonies. The deeper you looked into Ally's claims, the more disturbing the pattern became. Her knowledge of who attended these parties, the nature of the events, and the rules that governed them painted a picture that many had long suspected but few dared to name publicly. She described elaborate play setups, terms that other accusers later echoed, suggesting a theme of role-playing, control, and submissive behavior encouraged or demanded during these private gatherings. What are your thoughts on Ally Carter's silence? Share your opinions in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for ongoing coverage. Diddy's hidden parties are the hot topic of today, and with every passing day, new shocking details about those parties are coming to the surface. Let's now let you what really happened behind closed doors at Diddy's exclusive gatherings. The world saw them as glamorous. Images from Diddy's famed white parties in the Hamptons, his birthday galas in Miami, and the elite Grammy after-parties gave the illusion of prestige, power, and privilege. But beyond the filtered photos and celebrity cameos, there existed a side of these gatherings that no one was meant to talk about. Behind closed doors, away from cameras and headlines, were what insiders came to describe as freak-offs, underground gatherings that blurred the line between celebration and control. The phrase freak-off wasn't created by bloggers or YouTubers. It came directly from people who claimed to have been there. Several former partygoers, including music industry assistants, stylists, and private security personnel, later revealed that these events were separate from the public parties. They were invite-only, usually held in hotel penthouses, private mansions, or hidden areas inside clubs that had been completely cleared out and swept for privacy. Phones were taken at the door. NDAs were signed, and the atmosphere quickly shifted from casual to coded. One former industry runner who spoke anonymously in a 2023 podcast described the scene as surreal. He said, "It wasn't about the music anymore. Once the cameras were off, it was a different room. You weren't just there to vibe. You were there for a reason, and everyone knew their role." Women were reportedly flown in from out of state, sometimes internationally. Some were models. Others were referred through stylists or party planners. Allegedly, they were told it was a modeling opportunity or private performance gig, only to realize they were expected to stay well into the night, often under the influence of alcohol or substances provided on-site. One woman, a dancer who later spoke to an independent investigative channel, said, "There was this pressure to participate. You couldn't just stand around. You were watched, and you knew that if you refused something, you probably weren't getting invited back. Or worse, you'd be kicked out and blacklisted." Accounts like hers weren't isolated. Over the years, rumors of Diddy's private parties being more than just wild began to circulate in low-profile interviews, gossip blogs, and encrypted chat rooms frequented by entertainment insiders. A former security detail for a high-profile artist once described being told explicitly, "You do not go past this door. That's VIP VIP." What happened past that point was not documented. But allegations that later emerged through lawsuits and media reports painted a disturbing pattern. Some claims described group intimacy, often under pressure, with power dynamics clearly favoring the host and his inner circle. Others alleged that women were asked to perform, undress, or engage in humiliating acts while being recorded or watched. In one of the civil lawsuits filed against Diddy in 2023, a plaintiff described being forced into acts that left her traumatized and silenced by threats. These alleged experiences took place in private residences, some of which had been used for years for similar events, according to documents reviewed by journalists and legal teams. The music industry for a long time viewed Diddy as the ultimate mogul, someone who knew how to throw a party and elevate culture. But that narrative, carefully crafted over decades, is now clashing with a darker counterstory that was whispered about but never confirmed. Insiders had long used phrases like adult playground, invite only after hours, or vibe when referring to some of Diddy's events. It wasn't until these stories were cross-referenced, particularly after Cassie Ventura's explosive 2023 lawsuit, that the term freak-off became more widely recognized. The cultural perception of these parties was always celebratory on the surface. Photos would show Jay-Z, West, Usher, and other major artists laughing together, champagne in hand. The allure of being close to Diddy meant proximity to power. To be invited was seen as a badge of honor. Few questioned what happened once the public part of the event ended and the guest list became much smaller. But now, as more individuals speak out and legal pressure mounts, the perception has shifted. Those same parties are being re-examined not as moments of freedom, but as alleged environments of coercion. Survivors have started sharing their stories in anonymous interviews. Some have stated that the environment was not only toxic, but also emotionally damaging. There were claims of emotional manipulation, forced intoxication, and even mental breakdowns triggered by what occurred in those settings. The emotional damage is hard to quantify, but its evidence is growing. Alleged victims have reported feeling trapped, degraded, and ashamed. Some never spoke about it until recently. Others were allegedly paid to stay silent. This silence, maintained over years, helped preserve Diddy's public image. Even those who suspected something was wrong often chose to look away. One former assistant put it plainly, "You don't ask questions, you don't break the circle, you just smile and keep working." What was once considered edgy or eccentric is now being described in legal terms: manipulation, intimidation, coercion. The shift is stark. Industry leaders who once praised Diddy for his extravagant taste are now distancing themselves. Brands have quietly removed mentions. Collaborators have issued vague statements. And the very phrase "freak off" has gone from whispered excitement to a symbol of something sinister. For years, these parties helped build a mythology around power, pleasure, and exclusivity. But now, they are at the center of a reckoning, one that questions how much people were willing to ignore and for how long. You would be surprised to know which familiar faces were present at these controversial events, and what do they have to say now? Over the years, some of the most recognizable names in music and entertainment were regularly seen at Diddy's events. From documented appearances, media photos, and public interviews, a list slowly emerged, one that now feels heavier under the shadow of serious allegations. Jay-Z was a frequent guest. He and Diddy had long shared a professional rapport. Photos of the two clinking glasses at high-profile events like the Rock Nation brunch or private Grammy after-parties were common. Two was spotted at several of those gatherings, particularly the larger, industry-facing celebrations. Williams, Usher, Drake, and were also repeatedly photographed alongside Diddy during various parties over the years, many of which were described as legendary by blogs and magazines. Outside of music, figures like Campbell, French Montana, and Justin were also seen attending. These appearances weren't necessarily controversial at the time. They were part of a broader culture of celebrity socializing, events that fused music, fashion, and wealth. No one questioned the atmosphere then. No one asked what happened when the photos ended and the public was ushered out. But now, as the legal lens zooms in on Diddy's private life, every past association is being reconsidered. While there is no direct evidence implicating these celebrities in any misconduct, their presence at events now being described by insiders as exploitative is forcing a conversation about awareness, complicity, and silence. The public is not reacting the same way it once did. Fans have begun dissecting past images and resurfaced videos. Questions flood social media. Why were certain people always there? Did they know? Did they see anything? And why are they so quiet now? Usher, who previously lived with Diddy when he was just a teenager, addressed the topic cautiously during a 2023 podcast interview. While he did not directly comment on any specific allegation, he acknowledged that his early exposure to the music industry came with a lot of grown-up situations that he was not fully prepared for. His statement was widely interpreted as a subtle admission of discomfort, though he stopped short of naming anyone or any specific event. Justin has remained silent publicly, though rumors and clips involving his presence at various parties have been heavily circulated online. His fans have defended him, arguing that his attendance was during his younger years, and that he too may have been manipulated or unaware of deeper dynamics. Still, the speculation around his connection to Diddy has not gone away. Who once shared photos from Diddy's white parties in the Hamptons and appeared at his birthday celebrations, has not released any statement addressing the broader situation. Some media outlets have noted that, while she has publicly spoken about women's rights and justice reform, she has remained quiet on the lawsuits involving Diddy. This silence has led to criticism from followers who expect more accountability from celebrities with large platforms. Others, like French Montana, and have either downplayed their connection or avoided addressing it altogether. Several artists previously affiliated with Bad Boy Records have distanced themselves without making formal statements. A former producer close to the label said anonymously in an interview that the industry is holding its breath, waiting to see who else might speak up or be named. The implications for these public figures go beyond awkward headlines. Brand partnerships, public reputation, and future collaborations hang in the balance. In an era where silence is interpreted as complicity, the choice to not speak out has its own cost. Fans are more vocal than ever. Sponsorships are watching closely, and streaming platforms are beginning to assess the potential backlash of continued association with certain artists. Whose involvement surprises you the most? Let us know in the comments and subscribe for more updates. Diddy had been quietly preparing for his May 5 hearing, holding on to the hope that maybe, just maybe, he could escape the storm once again. But this time the storm isn't fading, it's growing, and the case is now spiraling into darker territory than anyone expected. By the time Diddy Combs walked into the courtroom on May 5, 2025, the walls had already begun to close in. The atmosphere was tense. Cameras waited outside. Inside, journalists, attorneys, and observers prepared for what would become one of the most devastating days of the trial so far. Diddy had hoped this hearing would turn the tide. Instead, it exposed even more of the disturbing picture prosecutors had spent months building. One allegation, one piece of evidence, one broken silence at a time. The day opened with a series of witness testimonies that prosecutors described as foundational to the case. At the center was Cassie Ventura, Diddy's former partner. Although her civil case against him had been settled in 2023, her full sworn testimony had now been entered into federal proceedings. It was extensive, it was emotional, and it was deeply disturbing. Cassie described over a decade of alleged abuse, emotional, physical, and psychological. She spoke of being isolated, manipulated, and placed into situations, she said, no one should ever experience. Cassie's account included details of events referred to as freak-offs, private gatherings allegedly organized and directed by Diddy where women were encouraged or pressured to participate in drug-fueled sexual encounters while being watched or filmed. Her words were graphic but composed. She said she was often forced to take substances, stripped of personal agency, and left feeling like a puppet controlled by fear. Her mother, Regina Ventura, took the stand later that morning. She told the court she had witnessed the aftermath of some of these events. One incident in 2011 stood out. Regina described how Cassie returned home with visible bruises and emotional distress. She said she took photos to document what she saw. Those images were entered into evidence, photographs showing injuries on Cassie's arms and legs. Regina also spoke of a financial transaction. She claimed she paid Diddy $20,000 in cash after he allegedly threatened to release explicit videos of her daughter. The payment, she said, was made out of fear. Next came Dawn Richard, a former member of. Her testimony added a new layer of credibility. She spoke of witnessing Diddy attempt to strike Cassie with a frying pan during an argument. Dawn claimed that after trying to intervene, she was locked inside a room for hours. She said the message was clear. Interference was not tolerated. Her account supported Cassie's timeline and introduced a second first-hand witness to the violent dynamics of the relationship. Prosecutors also called Hayes, an exotic dancer who described participating in what he called choreographed encounters involving Cassie. Hayes that he was hired multiple times to engage in intimate acts while Diddy watched and sometimes directed the interaction. He described the environment as predatory and said it became unbearable after a particular incident left him shaken. He eventually stopped showing up, but never forgot what he saw. Following these testimonies, prosecutors introduced a range of physical evidence. The most impactful were the photographs taken by Cassie's mother, shown on a courtroom projector. The images drew reactions from nearly everyone in the room. The jury remained stone-faced, but observers noted the sudden shift in energy. These were no longer just allegations, they were visual confirmations of harm. Additional evidence included a series of text messages between Diddy and Cassie, some dated as far back as 2012. In one exchange, Cassie appeared to accuse him of treating her like Turner. The reference to the abusive relationship between and Tina Turner left no ambiguity. The prosecution said it reflected a dynamic rooted in control, intimidation, and trauma. They also presented hotel records, surveillance reports, and photographs of items retrieved from Diddy's Miami hotel room during a federal raid earlier in the year. These items included bottles of baby oil, various lubricants, a bag of unidentified white powder, prescription pills not listed under Diddy's name, and large stacks of cash. Prosecutors argued that these materials, found inside a space used for multiple private events, showed premeditation and an intent to exploit. They said this was not a lifestyle, it was a system. The media coverage exploded within hours. Rolling Stone, the New York Times, and CNN all led with headlines focused on Cassie's testimony. News Nation aired segments featuring legal analysts who said the case had officially crossed the line from questionable to undeniable. Social media amplified the reaction, especially among younger users who had followed the story closely. Hashtags tied to Diddy and Cassie trended globally. TikTok creators broke down the timeline in viral explainers. Instagram influencers who once celebrated Diddy's parties either stayed silent or deleted past posts. The coverage did not stop at entertainment pages. Political commentators, survivors, rights activists, and cultural analysts weighed in. Many compared this case to the reckoning scene in the trial. Others argued that the music industry was finally being forced to face the structures it had long protected. As one columnist wrote, What was once whispered in green rooms is now echoing in federal court. Please let us know, how do you think this evidence affects the case? Now you must be wondering, how is Diddy's legal team responding to the mounting allegations, and what does the future hold? Throughout the hearing, Diddy sat motionless at times, his eyes fixed on the screen as photographs of bruises and text messages appeared before the jury. Other times, he leaned back, shaking his head softly as witnesses described events that prosecutors argued took place under his direction. The images were raw, the accounts were emotional, but his reaction remained contained, disbelief, frustration, and quiet tension visible in brief glances to his attorneys, but never in outbursts. One legal analyst inside the courtroom noted that Diddy seemed deeply focused, but also clearly unsettled during Cassie Ventura's testimony. Her voice was calm but firm as she described years of abuse, including claims of being forced into drug-fueled sexual encounters, locked into dependency, and threatened into silence. As her mother, Regina Ventura, about paying Diddy $20,000 to prevent the release of explicit content, Diddy briefly lowered his head. His body language, once guarded and confident, appeared momentarily vulnerable. Still, he made no public comment during the break. No statements were issued, but his legal team was ready. Led by seasoned attorneys Mark and Steele, Diddy's defense responded with a firm denial of the accusations. They did not ignore the emotional weight of the testimony, but insisted that the public needed to distinguish between a volatile relationship and criminal conduct. According to them, what was being described was a troubled past, not a criminal enterprise. The defense's strategy was built on three core pillars. First, they acknowledged the public fascination with Diddy's lifestyle, but argued that wealth and fame do not automatically translate to guilt. There is a difference between controversy and conspiracy, one defense briefing read. The attorneys emphasized that none of the material evidence presented thus far, photos, text messages, or property searches, could definitively prove that Diddy had orchestrated or led an organized operation of trafficking or abuse. They claimed the prosecution was relying on circumstantial evidence amplified by media attention. Second, they challenged the credibility of the witnesses. The defense team raised concerns about the motivations behind the testimonies, suggesting that personal grievances, emotional bias, or financial incentives could be shaping the narratives. They pointed to past settlements and the timing of the lawsuits, including Cassie's civil case in 2023, to argue that her statements now were being influenced by public momentum and personal interest. Third, they argued that the relationships described, while intense and at times damaging, were based on mutual consent. In statements released to the press, the legal team insisted that Cassie and others had remained in Diddy's social and professional circle for years, even after the alleged abuse took place. They questioned why these individuals had not spoken out earlier and why certain details were only surfacing after law enforcement raids made headlines. During court proceedings, they maintained that items found in hotel rooms and properties, such as baby oil, large sums of cash, and unmarked substances, were not uncommon for celebrities who host high-end parties and travel frequently. The defense argued that such items, taken in isolation, did not prove intent or criminal action. But despite these arguments, the public narrative is shifting. Diddy's denial, though firm, is now facing a chorus of voices that stretch beyond his inner circle. The testimonies of former collaborators, former employees, and those who attended his private events are forming a wider pattern, and the court of public opinion is not waiting for a verdict. What comes next for Diddy is uncertain. His legal team is expected to begin presenting their side of the case in the upcoming sessions. They are believed to be preparing several witnesses who will testify to his character, challenge the credibility of key accusers, and explain away what they call misunderstood evidence. They may also bring in industry professionals to testify that many of the party practices being described are not uncommon in entertainment circles and do not necessarily imply criminal behavior. Privately, sources close to the case say Diddy is feeling the pressure. While he continues to maintain his innocence, he is aware that this trial is not just about legal definitions. It is about reputation, legacy, and survival. His businesses are already facing fallout. Sponsorship deals are stalled. Public appearances have been canceled. Streaming platforms are reconsidering partnerships. The silence around him is growing louder. The courtroom is not the only place where judgment is being made. Online, his name trends daily. Every testimony becomes a viral clip. Every piece of evidence is dissected and debated. Supporters argue for due process, but even they admit the accusations are hard to ignore. Whether or not he is found guilty of criminal charges, Diddy Combs is facing a dismantling of the myth he built around himself. A myth of power, success, and control. And in the weeks ahead, as the defense tries to pull the spotlight back in his favor, the outcome may rest not just on what is proven, but on what the world is no longer willing to look away from. What are your thoughts on Diddy's latest trial and what might be next for him? Share your opinions in the comments below and click on the cards on screen for more in-depth coverage.